Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Market Bites. Hope you are all doing well. We're live and direct. Me from London, Josh from Sydney. Josh, how are you?
I'm very good, Sam. I'm very good. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Just before we came on air, we were talking about the Ashes, weren't we? Of course, you're off to a couple of those tests potentially this year, which would be cool. Australia v England. I'm not sure how many cricket fans we've got listening to this, but with the football season done, we've got to talk about sports somehow, don't we?
Yeah, we're going to shift strategy. So it's the end of football for the time being, although we might get a bit of transfer talk in there at some point. Into the rugby with the Lions. We had a little chat about that, and then obviously into Ashes as well. So big year ahead for English, well, I should say British sports in Australia coming up, and also pretty exciting as well because these things only come around every sort of number of years. So it's a nice time to be in Australia, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, then you've got the Olympics. Is that not too far away, or was
2027,
it
I think, in Brisbane. Yeah.
2027? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Rugby World Cup as well,
Yeah.
not too far away. Yeah, what a time to be. You timed it well, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You bought low and you can sell high whenever you want. What an investment that was. But yeah, maybe we will get some transfer news. I always think how funny it would be if, from an investing standpoint, for like traders, there was only a short window you could actually make any adjustments to your portfolio, whether that would be a better or worse thing for people. On one hand, it would encourage people to at least hold positions a little bit longer. On the other, you'd be like, in that period where you can't buy something, you'd be like, oh my God, I need that window to come now so I can get in
Yeah.
this position. But interesting times in the world of sport, but also interesting times in the world of markets. Tariffs, of course, still top of the headline. We've got a bit of data out this week as well. Got non-farm payrolls, which is always interesting. Got CPI at the US next week. You've got big central bank meetings coming up as well as this week as well. So there's always enough to discuss, but we thought we'd look at Lululemon today and ask the question, can they become as big as Nike? So we'll discuss a few little bits and pieces, and then we'll come to our answer for that. I actually asked people on etoro yesterday whether they could, and I'm just gonna get the answer that they said now. Just bear with me 1 second. So 32% said yes one day, and 68% said no chance. But we'll review all of that, and maybe by the end of this podcast, people might change their answer one way or another. But does that sound good to you, Josh?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, I mean, look, two great brands. I've certainly seen quite a few Lululemon shops popping up over the last year or so. So comes at a time when maybe Nike's demise is happening as well. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what we can get through here.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a look at the charts for both Lululemon and Nike. As you mentioned, Nike, I think, is trading in and around $60, which is considerably off its all-time high in around 180. But we'll talk about that in a moment. But let's talk about Lululemon earnings this week. What are we expecting?
Yeah, it came off the back of some pretty decent earnings last quarter as well. So a bit of renewed investor optimism, I would say. The challenge is sort of going to be navigating what is US tariffs. Again, same sort of issue for Nike. And again, it's that sort of uncertainty, really. So again, a lot of it's going to be around commentary because a lot of its products are manufactured in Vietnam and China. Tariffs there are obviously pretty high, as we know. Obviously, we've got the pause on China, but Vietnam's, tariffs were pretty high as well, pauses across the world as well. But look, Lululemon, they reckon that, gross margins could be hit by about 7.2%, which is pretty decent. That's a big clip, right? And it comes back to a lot of this conversation around tariffs. I'm doing a piece on Taiwan Semiconductor at the moment and also sort of facing the issue of having to sort of try and take some of its manufacturing over to the US, but that comes from a cost increase from them moving it to the United States. And does that then come through and affect their bottom line and their margins, or do you pass that on to your consumers? Someone like Taiwan Semiconductor, they have the pricing power and the ability to do that. If you're Lululemon, do you then have the ability to pass that on to the consumer, dent your brand image, maybe push your consumer away to somebody else? That's the big question mark that I think a lot of investors will have. Looking to earnings, sales growth looks to sort of stay solid, looking at the upper end of its forecast around about 6 to 7%. That's thanks to some stronger product offerings. Again, I mentioned a few stores popping up. They do have some really great products at the moment. A lot of friends wearing the gear. China remains a pretty key growth driver for the business, but sales in Americas are lagging as well. Looking at what to expect from the options market, looking about a 9% move either way following earnings. So either way, we're going to be getting some volatility ahead when the results are handed down. And I've got a funny feeling that we could see a move that's bigger than 9%, given that everything that we've got going on with China, with tariffs, and obviously what's been happening with Nike as well. So, I think we'll see a big move from Lululemon this week.
Yeah, worth keeping an eye on there. I was just having a quick at the largest clothing companies in the world. Number one, Hermes, LVMH. It could have a good day and goes to number one. It's that close at the top, really. But Nike sits at number 6, currently up 2. Dior down 2, so a bit of a change there. And then Nike 6 and Lululemon currently 11, but not a million miles away in fairness. But let's have a quick look at the charts for Lululemon. Yesterday finishing up 3.7% on the close in US, and we go back to their IPO, the sort of the midpoint of 2019, and it is up from there, which is great. I mean, it was in a period where, if we go back to December 2023, from its IPO, it was up, quite considerably, 191%. You go to that all-time high that I just mentioned to where we're trading now, and it is down a touch. It's down nearly 40%, 35-40%. So you could argue it's sort of mid-range of the last 4.5 years, really. So it's at an interesting point where it either kicks on and goes now, or it's just going to stay in this range, do nothing, or drift back down towards that low that it had in March and also July, August last year. So it's a pretty key zone, I would say, from a, if you're sitting here listening to this, or you're doing your own research, looking at Lululemon, and you wanted sort of a line in the sand for the bulls to be comfortable being long, for me, that's in and around 280, which is considerably higher than where we're lower, I would say, than where we're trading now. We're trading at 334. But that would be an area where if we do come under a little bit of pressure, we do get that 9% or more move to the downside. As long as you stay above 280, I think people will generally be okay. And then what the bulls would really want to see is a significant move back above 362, which would be pretty key support in December before the breakdown. And that would really be, a big win for investors there. So yeah, 2 key levels, 362 and 280, I would say. And if you chuck in 334 where we're trading, it's pretty much bang in the middle of those. Nike, as I mentioned, trading at a very key point. You go back to the pandemic, the COVID low, which was, to be roughly precise, is in around sort of 59.90, something like that. And we're trading at the moment 62.37. So, Nike actually did go as low as 52 this year. So I do wonder whether people have now seen enough and think there's really value there for Nike, and we can start to push up. But, that said, we've had a couple of false dawns already for Nike. You go back to July last year, you had a rally of 27% before pushing down to a new low. You had a move from February this year, which went up 20% before it then rallied, moved lower again. And we've had plenty of times over, to be honest, the last 4 years where you've had decent moves up, only to be led by bigger moves to the downside. So is there enough value here now? We're currently just above the COVID low. I think you'd have had a lot of people looking at Nike and say, if we go to that COVID low, I see a bit of an opportunity here. Just for reference, that COVID low to the all-time high was a 193% move. So there will be people saying, you know what, if I get in and around that COVID low and it goes back to its all-time high in 1, 2, 3 years, you're making 200%. However, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen, of course. But those would be the areas, the levels that I would be keeping an eye on. But of course, look, it's not just Nike, that competition for Lululemon. So who are we talking about when we sort of do that sort of peer analysis?
Yeah, so obviously Nike, the sort of the big one. Then you've obviously got Adidas. They're both sort of, sportswear giants, arguably. And, from the athleisure wear and footwear, and obviously they have very similar product lines. And these two are known for their brand recognition. We were talking about sports earlier across sort of cricket, rugby, and football. Nike and Adidas dominate, right? And you think about Lululemon from a sponsorship perspective. I think it just moved into golf, but again in a very very small way. And interesting, they actually sponsored a Australian golfer, and it was the first time they actually put a logo on their clothes, like on the polo shirt, because they were basically like, well, if you're paying all of this money to sponsor a golfer, you need to put your brand out there. Like someone needs to know what he's wearing. So that was an interesting move for them, obviously trying to get a little bit deeper into sort of sports. Then we've also got these sort of emerging brands as well, which I would say that Lulu, from a comparison of like Nike and Adidas, is maybe seen as slightly more premium, slightly more niche. And I think they've gained some market share among sort of younger consumers. And then you've got a brand like Alo. They've sort of really started to come through. Alo Yoga. When I was in Dubai just recently, a huge store in Dubai Mall, and it was packed. Lots of people in there. So clearly a brand that's trending. Clearly a brand that's obviously resonating with younger consumers. On the footwear side, look, not sure really how much Lululemon are going to compete here, but you've got sort of Hoka and On Running. They're the sort of the two names really coming up against Nike and Adidas for market share. I'm not sure Lululemon will focus too much on the sort of the footwear side of things, but still, these are two very, very big brands. I think they'll realize that from a perspective. But again, at the same time, I'm sure they've probably got great products, but really they're known for, those yoga pants and, the sort of top quality products. And they're actually making some really nice, just general clothing now as well. Like sort of smart wear, polo shirts, active wear, those types of things, like everyday sort of essentials, not just sort of gym wear. That's sort of quite light. I have a colleague in the office, and he is obsessed with Lululemon. He wears a Lululemon polo shirt almost every day. So that must tell you something. They must be good. And he's a very smart man. So, look, I guess the question is it a concern, right? Is this rise of Alo, a concern, market share? They're certainly gaining traction, these sort of challenger brands. There's no doubt about that. Certainly sort of pushing through. Obviously, Hoka and On Running, rapid footwear growth as well. Certainly challenges if Lululemon is looking to sort of move into shoes as well. But then I also think on the other side of that as well, if you think about consumer trends, I think we're starting to see people move to sometimes smaller brands. All of my friends that I play football with all have Whoops now. I mean, it's really coming through, isn't it? And like that's something like a subscription model basis as well. So I think, if you can then maybe add something like that, if Whoop maybe go into sort of products or, leisure wear, does that then, become a competition? And so I think all of those things that, can really challenge Lululemon as well. And then of course you can't forget about your Nike and your Adidas's. They're the dominant ones, they're the ones with the capital, they're the ones that are really coming through. So there's more competition out there than obviously just those Nike and Adidas and Pumas and Under Armours, etc. So some of those sort of challenger brands that are maybe looking to sort of move into sort of Lululemon's market, which is slightly more premium, slightly more niche than what you would get with Nike or Adidas.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Whoop there, and it just goes to show how important brand ambassadors are. You've got Cristiano Ronaldo, who I think was on the podcast with the founder recently, and he always talks about the importance of it. Rory McIlroy as well, didn't he? I think he was wearing it, and the day before a golf tournament, it told him he was going to be feeling under the weather or something like that. So I think the people caring more and more about this stuff, and looking at Alo Yoga, and I think you've got, is it Kylie Jenner is like a brand ambassador for them, and you're seeing more and more people wear this kind of gear, and the Hoka running shoes, and it's a market that you go back 5-10 years ago probably wasn't as competitive as it is now, and that's obviously not just a challenge for Lulu, but for your Nike as well, to be honest. And when we talk about Nike struggles, people saying they've got this lack of innovation in recent times, and you know what, I'd probably agree with that, to be honest. Over the last few years, I'm wearing Nike now. I wear it head to toe to play golf, head to toe to play tennis. And I can't change to go to Adidas, even though I think they've got better gear right now because I've got so much Nike stuff. It would be like I'd have to get a whole new wardrobe, load of different outfits. So I'm constantly annoyed at Nike for not bringing out anything too good. Albeit recently they brought out a new trainer, the P6000, which I'm seeing more and more people start to wear from a sort of a casual point of view, which looks pretty good. So I wonder if that's like a bit of a change for them to hopefully do well. Because what is it? What's the Adidas shoes that everyone was wearing? Is it the Sambas or something? Or
Sambas,
the
yeah,
Sambas? There was
gazelles as well.
gazelles.
Yeah, I
Last
mean,
two years.
I actually made a sin. I think a leisure wear sin or a sportswear sin at the weekend when I think back now. So I was playing football on Saturday, and I was thinking back. So I'm a goalkeeper, so I had a pair of Puma gloves on.
Mm.
I had Nike shirt, Nike shorts, and then Adidas football boots. Shocking, just going across all three brands there.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, whenever I see anyone walking down the street and they've got like Nike socks on and like Adidas shoes, I just think,
Nah, come on,
that's
what are you
such a
doing?
rookie mistake.
Yeah,
Even though I definitely did that when I was younger. Now I'm just like, that idiot that has got all the gear, no idea. But yeah, those Adidas shoes, there was a summer, and girls are certainly in London still wearing them all the
yeah,
time.
for sure.
So they're incredibly popular, and the lads are wearing them too now. So yeah, Nike had a bit of an issue on their hand, and listen, you can see that in the share price. There's no two ways about it. They took that shift to direct to consumer sales, which didn't quite work. They cut ties with retailers as well. And, we talked about the competition already, whether it be Hoka, whether it be On Running, Lululemon or Adidas, which have done incredibly well, albeit they've come off a little bit in recent times. But their recovery was great. I mean, if you remember, Adidas, and I'm just going to get the chart up, especially when, they had the whole issue with Kanye and the Yeezys. I mean, that led to, I think the drop from their peak was, I think it was around 80%. Let me see, the high in 2021 to the low in 2022, yes, 71%, albeit it's recovered nicely since then. I mean, it got as low as $94, $91 now, trading at 215, but that all-time high is up at 337, so bang in the middle of that range. But the competition got better, and when you're top dog, the only direction is down. So they need to pick things up. The earnings haven't been great for them either. So they do need to sort things out as well, and you also think from their brand ambassadors across the globe, they lost Federer, they lost Tiger Woods, Ronaldo's getting older, so maybe there's room for a Nadal as well, of course, getting on and retired, so they maybe need to sort of get back to where they were. I would say go back to their roots, and I know they made I was going to say signings, but they've employed people from within who know a little bit about all of that. So hopefully they can get back on the right track. But we'll have to have a look at that. But in terms of growth potential, out of the two for Lulu and Nike, how does it compare at the moment?
Yeah, Lulu's obviously growing faster than what Nike is, just because I guess Nike's more a well-established brand, right? Lulu's probably got more penetration across the world. So revenue growth, 15% annualized earnings growth. That outpaces Nike at about 11%. And as I say, that's coming from that strong international expansion, especially in China, 34% revenue growth as well in Q2. But if you're going to scale to the size of Nike, you've really got to go you can't just stick with, yoga pants, right? And I mentioned a moment ago about sort of maybe moving into slightly more common everyday wear. I think that's going to be needed. They do have things like bags that get worn quite often. My housemate has a Lululemon backpack. So I think it's those little things that are going to be really important. Shoes are obviously massive for Nike, but they just do so much, I think, Nike, and when we think about shoes-wise, and we talk about Adidas have had a great year from a financial perspective. 2024 was a great year. Profits grew thanks to your Sambas and your Gazelles, and they really hit the nail on the head there. So I think that's really important, is trying to resonate with the younger consumers, have a product that is scalable, and mass, in terms of being able to be sold on a mass scale. That's really important too, right? Which is what those shoes really are. You think about like the Air Forces for Nike, that type of thing. But I think, look, if Lululemon are really going to try and, go up against them, I think that brand awareness is really important. I think that they've got great brand equity in North America, but I think they need to grow more overseas, whether that's in Europe, whether that's in Asia. China is still growing. They've still got room to move in sort of China, and Nike is obviously a big brand there as well. And so that could provide a pretty long way for growth. For Nike, what they've got to do is they've got to really go back to its core strength. They've got to go back to sort of focusing on sport. They're really speeding up product introductions. They're really going back to sort of, more innovation, sort of moving into sort of fresh performance categories. And they're also bringing out some pretty bold marketing campaigns as well. And I think that's going to try and really push them back into sort of leadership as well. So, innovation, that's a big part for them. Moving back into your running, your training, your lifestyle, that's massive. But I think Lululemon, they've got a decent balance sheet, 2 billion in cash. So, pretty strong innovation pipeline, proven ability to be able to execute. But then when you think about that in context, 2 billion is only about 10% of what Nike's cash pile is, right? So that sort of goes to tell you how hard it's going to be able to try and overtake. But I think sometimes from a smaller brand perspective, you can push the boundaries a little bit more. Nike have tried to do things, in the last couple of years that haven't paid off. Lululemon can maybe, afford to sort of try and be a bit different, try and find that sort of next trending product. I mean, think about, Abercrombie, for example, what a comeback they had from basically being a dead brand to sort of where they are now, where they're sort of really resonating with everyday consumers. So I do think, not saying Lululemon is a dead brand now, but it's more in terms of like, you can probably push the dial a little bit more than maybe what Nike can, because you expect a certain something from Nike, whereas Lululemon I think is maybe seen more as that innovator and premium. So you can probably, push the button a little bit more, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I like the gear at Abercrombie.
Yeah.
I haven't actually got any, but I on their website middle last week, and they've got nice gear. Whether you want that sort of logo-less brand or they've got their logo as well. It looks good, reasonably priced as well. And as you said, their recovery from those lows was just remarkable, incredible to see that there. And I know a few people that got some shares of that near the low, which is great. And I mean, it's quite interesting. I don't know whether it's the same for you, Josh, but it feels like, and I literally, while you were talking, just Googled this to confirm it, but it does feel like golf at the moment is as popular as it's ever been. I don't know, are you seeing that, with you and your pals?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few of my friends just don't have any interest in golf, but I do have a friend that's just taken out like a recent membership and things like that. But no, I think from like other, like especially in the group of I think lads that I know who play football, certainly becoming bigger, as well as that like maybe that side sport. Obviously football only goes on for a certain amount of time, and there's some great courses here in Australia as well. So I definitely think it is growing, and I think it's becoming a bit more of an acceptable sport. And I also think, catch me if I'm wrong here, but I also think a lot of guys are using it to rather than go to the pub. Right.
Yeah,
so I think drinking culture has changed quite a lot for maybe our generation, and especially friends that I have that are younger. So we would usually catch up with friends and go for a beer. A lot of people younger age, especially when they care about fitness, they don't tend to drink as much. I know so many people that just don't drink now. I think that's a big thing. Going and playing golf with the boys, maybe sneaking away from the missus for the afternoon or whatever it might be, right? You get that pass maybe that's maybe better than being able to go to the pub. And I think that's a big shift as well from a cultural perspective. So
yeah, it does feel like that. And I was in a golf shop, Trendy Golf it's called. I think they've got a store in a few in America, but they got one in Canary Wharf. And I went in there, and as I said, I'm wearing Nike gear, and I was speaking to them about that. I said, Nike took a massive step back from golf, didn't they? And they were like, yeah, but apparently they're coming back into it at the back end of this year in a pretty big way. And I tried to follow that up and look online, and there wasn't anything that confirmed that, but this guy was in the know. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there, because it does feel like golf is as popular as it's ever been. The stats back that up. It's grown for the sixth straight year in a row. And it's not just people our age, it's younger people as well. And YouTube golf is just massive at the moment. And I think, Nike need to, and other brands like Lululemon, you can understand their pivot into golf. You really, really can. So, I mean, look, before we get to the summary and I ask you the question, we can obviously discuss what's maybe holding Lululemon back a bit. We mentioned obviously America, they're doing okay, but I think it's 80% of their revenue is from there. So, growth in that market is slowing down a little bit, which means we need international expansion. And China is an area where that could work for sure. Consumer spending in China actually isn't too bad at all. But then you've got, tariffs, you've got geopolitical risks, you've got economic challenges that come with all of that. So that's an area of potential concern, but things go in ebbs and flows. So it's not a worry if it's a bad quarter, it's a worry if it's a bad year and a half, 2 years, isn't it? So that's an area I think they're obviously gonna keep an eye on. The competition as well. We mentioned your Alos, your Hokas, your On Runnings, and obviously then you've got Nike, you've got Adidas, you've got Pumas, all of these companies as well that we need to be aware of. So you can't stand still in this business. You've got to keep innovating. You've got to keep the price affordable, albeit the quality good as well in Lululemon's case. And that's pretty key. And consumer spending, as I mentioned, in China, it's not too bad. US up and down, although never bet against the US consumer, right? So in theory, you'd think that'd still be okay, but I think they're gonna have to keep an eye on that as well. They've also made a few, past ventures that haven't worked quite well with Mirror, for example, and that can sort of dilute their brand a little bit, or at least some people seem to think that did happen. So you've got to be careful with any ventures that you do, or any athletes that you partner with. Even that is important. Making the right decision, getting someone early, like Nike did with Michael Jordan. You could be looking back in 20, 30 years and Lulu somehow managed to get the next rising star in a certain sport, and that can be the thing that changes their fortunes. It can be as big as that. So they've got a lot to think about. They're not a million miles away from market cap. It has to be said. It's not like it's we're asking about a new AI company whether they can get to an Nvidia level. It's it's not billions and billions and billions away. But Josh, it does bring us to the question whether we think that they could one day be bigger than Nike.
I'm just going to flat out say no, to be honest. Look, I like their products. I think they've got a great brand. I definitely think they'll take some market share, but I just don't think that they've maybe got what it takes to go up against Nike. I think from a premium athletic wear side of the market, perfect. Yoga, running, gym, fitness, that side of thing. But I think to try and get close to like Nike and Adidas, like I say, from that mass product level, I think that's really, really hard. And I think especially now, when you think about their smaller scale, right? Nike completely dwarfs Lululemon from a market cap perspective, from a revenue perspective, right? And I think that if you think about the world we're about to go into with tariffs, trade tensions, etc., I think you don't have that supply chain leverage. You've also got that higher vulnerability to increase costs. You've got that higher difficulty of trying to shift inventory, which could potentially mean then you've got to discount prices, which then affects margins. So I think that's really hard to do, especially when you compare to Nike that have got the brand recognition. Like we said, Jordan, the brands from the celebrity endorsements. I just think that from a Lululemon perspective, okay, it's maybe driven by social media, things like that. Maybe go into that sort of strategy of micro influencers, which has been pretty big these days. So I do think they can grow significantly, but I don't think they'll be on the same level as Nike.
Yeah, I think that as well. Currently, market cap about 40 bill, Nike 92. Adidas though, not a million miles away, 44 billion. So that's something where that could change, and they keep building up. But to get to your Nike at 92 billion, and also this is talking about Nike at a massive discount as well.
Yeah.
You've also for that question, for the answer to be yes, you've got to see Nike really continuing to fall lower, and that's not impossible, but I think Nike are trying to turn a corner. It'll be slow, but then they get things right. They've got that presence, they've got that name, they've got that brand, that the recovery could be quite quick once they get going. But look, let us know what you're thinking in the comments, or message us. Be interested as always to hear what people think, and if anyone's changed their mind on eToro, go and comment on that as well. But Joshy, we'll wrap it up there for today. As always, thank you, and Nezha, if you're still listening, I hope you're well.
Yeah, lots of love to you, Nezha. See you soon.
See you.